Like if you win at AI, that is worth trillions of dollars to you. But if you lose at it, like you've basically become irrelevant. Like I think we are at this moment where it's not just about hiring up an army of like 100,000 people to work on a problem. It's about finding like the critical people who like really have the combination of like insight, ingenuity, but also just extreme like motivation and intensity to make big things happen.
Hello, fellow data nerds. My guest today is Howie Liu. Howie is the CEO and co-founder of Airtable, a collaborative spreadsheet and database platform that has raised over $1.4 billion. Wow. Airtable is at the forefront of no-code, low-code movement. Before founding Airtable in 2012, Howie sold his first startup, eTax, to Salesforce when he was just 21 years old. So now we know how old you are now, if you can do that. Howie, welcome to World of DaaS.
Thank you. Really good to be here, Auren. And I should do a shout out, which is we first met in the context of your prior company, Rapleaf, because that startup of mine, eTax, actually was a customer of Rapleaf. Like it, your data powered our product. So
yeah,
full
exactly.
circle.
I mean, I should have I wish I was smart enough to invest in Airtable when it started back then in 2012. By the way, as you know, I'm a huge fan of Airtable. I use it every single day. Tons of our companies use it. So I'm in it all the time. So I'm like, this is like going to be an advanced interview because I'm talking like
great.
power user here.
We can do some live debugging too.
Yeah, exactly. We'll debug live on the podcast. So let's talk about just like the no code, low code movement. Yeah. You kind of promised to democratize software creation. Where are we at on that vision?
So I think it's really interesting because the first wave of no code, which I like to think that we helped to pioneer, was really about like just taking all of these complicated but powerful app concepts. So data model, logic layer, automations, and then interface. And if you're a programmer, you know that like those three layers are effectively the building blocks of any application, like model, view, controller. And distilling them into a form that was like really intuitive for any non-technical person to interact with, right? So in effect, like doing for
by non-technical, you really mean like a non-software developer. They still could be like a relatively technical, person.
I think that it really comes down to like how well designed the product is, because in our case, like we wanted to make it for like everyone. I mean, literally everyone. So like, and just, as a proof point, like early on, we had like just such a broad range of users, cattle farmers, like literally cattle farmers, building cattle tracking apps, replacing, apparently there's like a whole vertical solution category for this, Cattle Max and all these other kind of brittle tools.
Oh my gosh.
We had like small, like legal firms, lawyers themselves going in and creating like their own rolled version of Case Map, which is a LexisNexis product. So they built their own case management software in Airtable. And I mean, the coolest like random use cases too would emerge. Like I remember being on a screen share with a woman who I think was like an octogenarian, and like going through and like cataloging like family memoirs, historical like kind of letters, and like literally figuring out how to like drag and drop into Airtable like these scanned attachments.
So cool.
So I think it really comes down to a test of how truly easy is the product to use, because there's been low code platforms for much longer than we've existed, right? Like, before Airtable, there were all these other products like QuickBase. Even Salesforce itself is technically a low code app platform. Like you can configure it to build any app you want. And even before then, like, I mean, there were back in the day, like FileMaker, Microsoft Access, like Lotus Notes, like Ashton-Tate DBase. And so I think what we really wanted to do was like truly lower the floor to an unprecedented level where like it really didn't require a like technical admin IT type person, let alone a programmer. Like it could be like truly anyone could go and build their own useful apps.
Yeah. And then where are we at? Like, where do you think, how much of that vision is realized? How much of it is still to come?
Yeah. So I think it's a perpetual journey, both in terms of like lowering the floor, and we're obviously in this like moment where I like this Bill Gates quote. Like he said recently, like there's only been two truly astounding technologies that I've seen in my life, like truly jaw-dropping moments, right? And one of them was the GUI. So like when he probably saw like Xerox Park and like the
Yeah.
original GUI, like it obviously sparked like the inspiration for both Microsoft and Apple to go do the same. And now ChatGPT, because we actually have like we've bottled up intelligence and kind of broad reasoning capability into an instantly available, fairly cheap API that can be scaled up on demand. And what that means for no code is like, I mean, literally, if you interpret the vision of no code not as like, okay, we have to just go and create GUI metaphors for app development, but instead now it's like you can do it without code, but through agentic conversational app building. And you see
Yep.
some of this with the vibe coding apps as well. Like you can go to a cursor as a non-developer and type into the sidebar chat, just build me an app, and it will
Yeah.
try to do a good
By the
job,
way,
right?
I was in, I was in Bolt.new today, like just like
Yeah.
doing that.
No,
It
it's
was
awesome.
great. Yeah.
And it's so magical too, because I think like the range of expression that you can do is just broadening and broadening, right? And the barrier to entry is dropping. Now, I think like the vibe coding products, like they do have some limitations, right? If you're using agents to
Sure.
generate actual code, like it's somewhat unreliable. There could be data issues, there could be security issues, and it's hard to like if you're not a developer, you can't actually inspect the thing that it's generating, right? Like you can't inspect the actual code itself. You can only
Yep.
look at like the rendered output and hope that underneath the hood, it's all working as it should be. And I think that's where we have a unique take, which is blending this concept of like no code GUI components where you can see and directly interact or edit with like the data layer, the automations layer, the interface layer, and like literally drag and drop things if you don't like how it was generated, but also add on top of like this, on top of that, this agentic, conversational layer where you just talk to our new agent Omni to do anything, like literally anything that required point and click in Airtable. Now you can just conversationally talk to this agent to do.
Where do you think, just in general, just if you think of just like a company
Yeah.
and software stack,
Yeah.
where do you think like AI is going to change the most, and where is it going to like kind of lag behind the least, let's say over the next kind of
Yeah.
3 to 5 years?
So I think that every software category is basically up for grabs, right? And like if you think about the disruption of SaaS versus on-prem software, like I actually think SaaS was really important, but like not actually as nearly as big of a deal as AI and agentic product experience. Meaning, like SaaS, it's like okay, great, like we massively reduced the overhead and cost of like maintaining software, of like maintaining this deployment. It was much easier to adopt and distribute. But like the software itself, the functionality was kind of the same, right? It's like okay,
Yeah.
now it's just like installed on prem or
It
it's
was
like
easier
hosted
to
in the
like,
cloud.
or it was easier to collaborate because there were a lot of things where
Sure,
like I would like download to my computer and pay $100 or something
totally.
before, but I couldn't collaborate with other people. So it's more of like a single player mode type of thing.
Absolutely. I mean that's very fair. And the hacks they had to like do multiplayer mode before. I mean, in our space, like
Correct.
think
Yeah,
about
it
Microsoft
was
Access.
annoying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, like Access, you literally had to save a file to a shared LAN
Yeah.
disk drive, right? And then like a network disk drive, and then like collaborate by like
I mean,
multiple clients.
before Git, I would use SVN to just
Yeah.
try to like, and I would like super hack it just to like share files with people and
Oh, I
stuff.
said, oh, not for actual code commits, but just like you would use it for like your own like Dropbox, like
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Like that was my Dropbox that we use internally in our
yeah.
company before, it was like it was terrible to break all the time. It was
Yeah,
super
well, I think
hacky.
you've officially earned your Uber nerd badge from that. Like when you use SVN for basic file sharing and collaboration, like you definitely earn a Uber nerd status. But yeah, I mean, it was like I agree with that. Like I think the distribution, like the sharing collaboration layer, was like probably the single biggest kind of disruptive force of SaaS. Like even like our contemporaries, like think about Figma versus
Yep.
Sketch, right? It was basically kind of the same functionality, but one Figma was much easier to sign up for, adopt, and then share. Anyone could
Yep.
open a collaborative file, and same with Airtable. But I think, like to me though, that's still very incremental relative to the massive disruptive change of like how product experiences, how software experiences can behave when it's fully AI native to the core, right?
Yeah.
And so, like when I think about a lot of the current software landscape, much of it is just like we went out and like especially in the vertical solutions world, like we built a vertical solution for one category, right? Be it plumbers, be it dog walkers, whatever, be it like small businesses like yoga studios, like mind body type stuff. And we just like built all of the data model and the business logic rules for this particular use case into our software. And now we have like a sales and distribution channel to sell it. But like fundamentally, it's just hard coded software, right? And
Yeah.
I think that like now, there's this massive disruption of like with agentic app building. First of all, the barrier to building your own truly bespoke software that's quite advanced, not just simple, has radically gone down.
Yeah.
So that obviously tilts the spectrum in favor of like custom software. But then on top of that, like the software itself should feel and have a different form factor, which is like it should be agentically infused. So if you build a CRM today, like it shouldn't just be your age-old CRM. It should actually have agents like automatically running within it that go out and do, web research about your customers, right? Or go and automatically listen to call transcripts or use MCP to grab data from other sources. And so I just think like the radical improvement in the product value that you can create with a truly AI native baked experience is so big of a difference that it makes all of the current incumbents, especially the legacy kind of enterprise incumbents, up for grabs.
And you mentioned MCP. Like, how bullish are you on being able to bring in data and kind of collaborate, as
Yeah,
opposed to just like or like the alternative is like
yeah.
needing access to the browser to go do it for the user or something?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, so I think both will be done agentically, right? So I
Yeah,
think that we've seen like what browser use looks like in the context of agents, not just like literally scraping the HTML like what deep research does, but like actually products like Operator from ChatGPT or Manus, etc., that now like just have literally the ability to scroll through a website, even like hand the user back control when it needs when it needs the human to go and do a captcha,
yeah.
type in your credentials, etc. So I think like, first of all, browser use doesn't mean you can't do it fully agentically. But I think it's a huge deal that agents are now able to effectively go and automatically do increasingly more and more, if not all, of what a human would have had to do with a desktop, right? And not just like on the web browser, or through MCP, but like, anything on your desktop. And I think like it's very clear that we're quickly approaching that point where at least anything that's like fairly deterministic or rote, like an AI agent can definitely do. I mean, we're seeing this like big kind of discussion in the e-commerce space of like what happens if like people start not going out and doing comparison shopping manually as they do today, where like they look, they search for some item in clothing, Google pops up its sponsored results,
Yeah.
like you look through those, you click on them, you examine them. What if you just tell an agent like everything about yourself and like what you like, your style, or it analyzes you, and then it just goes out and like looks for the perfect products for you,
Yeah,
and then can
that
even
would be
transact.
awesome.
Like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and like,
maybe we're
like
not the target.
I
Yeah,
by default buy probably almost everything on Amazon, and probably 70% of the time or 60% of the time it is the cheapest
yeah,
price. But there's a lot of probably ways I could probably get a cheaper one if I had an agent doing it for me, and it
totally.
just told me, hey, by the way, you were going to buy on Amazon, you just saved $50. I would be happy to share a percentage of my savings with the agent.
Totally. Totally. And by the way, like, I think the common misconception I see is like, AI and agents can only be used for very like logical tests, right? Where it's like, literally find me the lowest price. It's very utilitarian. But I
Yeah,
think like agents actually can kind of have a certain sense of taste, right? Like, I mean, you see this with like the creative applications of LLMs where ask it to compose a poem, about your company in this
yeah,
style
of
with this flair, and it
course,
does a
yeah.
very good job, right? And so I think it
Oh, I
actually
use
can
it to
learn.
pick
Yeah,
restaurants, to pick hotels,
totally.
like things that are very, very personal to me, and I
Yeah,
try to keep it, okay, here's what I'm doing, here's who I
totally.
am. And it does a, maybe it's not perfect, but it does a pretty good job. It does as good of a job as like, if
Probably
I
a
had
travel
a
concierge.
personal assistant do or
Yeah,
something.
exactly. And so I think that's really interesting where it's like it's not just like a comparison shopper. It can actually be like a personal shopper where it's finding products that it knows you might like, because it understands your tastes and preferences and style in subtle ways that are not just like a keyword match, right? So I think it gets really, really interesting when you start to look at, the disruption with agents as not just being strictly like rogue utilitarian tasks like what we could do with like RPA, for instance, where it was very, very scripted. And instead, like much more like subjective and, kind of soft feel tasks.
Now, back in the day, And if you think of Airtable 1.0, it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
Microsoft Access.
Yeah. Basically.
And Microsoft Access was like an amazing product. It was
Yeah.
so good. It was so well done. And then at some point, I don't know when, at some
Yeah.
point, like 20, 25 years ago, Microsoft just killed it for some
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah.
And they stopped investing in it. Do you have any idea why? Like it could have been
Yeah.
amazing. Like, why did they do that?
Yeah, yeah. So, funny enough, like we when we were founding Airtable, we instead of just looking to the future of like where we thought things were going, we also looked to the past to like try to
Yeah.
understand like the existing, the prior art, the Microsoft Accesses of the world. And by the way, like Lotus Notes also conceptually similar and like a very very successful product for its time, kind of like groundbreaking in terms of the paradigm they defined there. Kind of the first like collaboration meets like structured data sort of type product. But long story short, like I ended up talking to a number of people who were literally involved in Microsoft Access,
Oh wow.
Excel, et cetera, like Steven Sinofsky, Adam Bosworth, who actually created the very first GUI database as his own company, and then
Oh,
led,
I didn't know that.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly, led a different one of the other leading database companies early on, and then later joined Microsoft to run Access, and then Steven, was a leader at Microsoft that I think oversaw the Office suite at one point, and beyond. But the story that I ended up piecing together was that actually at one point, Access and Excel were kind of like effectively two peer products that were both like really, really important, right? One's a
Yeah.
database, one's a spreadsheet. Spreadsheets more
Yeah.
for number crunching, like ad hoc analysis,
Yeah.
databases for like structured list data, CRME, ERP type use cases that you build yourself, right?
Yeah.
But if you look at the products superficially, they kind of look the same, right? Like they both
Yeah.
have like this like tabular view, this grid view, and Excel actually had started building more table-like functionality into Excel, so it wasn't just number crunching. You could kind of use it to make a list, and so
Yep.
literally like what I heard was like there was a literal moment where like Bill Gates called a meeting because he was hearing all this consumer confusion, and the head of Access and the head of Excel were in a room together with Gates, and he was like, "This is way too confusing. We gotta like basically decide on one product to be kind of the default product that
Oh,
subsumes both of
interesting.
these use cases, and then the other one will kind of relegate into like a more like kind of edge case
Okay,
or
so
kind of power
it's
user
interesting
product."
because I always thought the alternative history is like Access would be amazing, but potentially the alternative history is that Excel wouldn't be as good as it is today. Because they wouldn't
Well,
be
yeah, I mean, I
investing
think
in as much, or
yeah,
maybe like because if they kind of like spread their bets, it wouldn't have been as good.
yeah, maybe. I mean, Microsoft also had like enormous resources at the time, so like I think they could have made both products really great. And I think it was more
Yeah,
of like a like consumer confusion issue for them. But I mean, I think there could have been an alternate world where like Excel actually got relegated into a power user tool for like finance geeks, right? And
yeah,
it stayed mostly a number crunching tool rather than becoming like the dominant default. In fact, I remember like as a kid when I installed Microsoft Office, like whatever, like 95, right? Like the one that came with Windows 95. Like,
yep.
I don't think we got Access by default with the bundle. I
No,
think it
you had
was
to
like
pay
Excel, Word.
more. It was like a
Yeah,
professional to get access. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And so, like, what if Access had been the default bundled product, and actually, like,
yeah.
more people need
More people would have
effectively a
used it.
database than advanced number crunching, spreadsheet that can do IRR. Like, it could have been very vice versa.
Yeah. I mean, the first like web application I ever built was built on Microsoft Access.
Oh no way.
And I put Microsoft Access like
Yeah,
in the cloud, and then I built a whole web application on top of it. And
that's
it
awesome.
was essentially like the database, like
Yeah,
I mean, of not a very fast database, so obviously didn't scale that well, but the database running underneath it. And then
that's
then you have
awesome.
to like upgrade. The other thing is like, yeah, they forced you eventually to upgrade like SQL
Mm,
Server back then,
right.
right? And so you had these
Oh
other
yeah,
kind of, and
yeah,
SQL
yeah,
Server was just like a terrible product and
yeah.
really hard to use. And okay, well, okay. Now, okay, another question I have for you. So I'd say like maybe 4 years ago when I was
Yeah.
considering hiring like a marketer, my basic question to them was like, how good are you at Zapier?
Mm,
And if you were
interesting.
not good at Zapier, like
Yeah.
if you first of all, you never even heard of it, like the interview would end, right?
That's right.
If you and then if I would just like say, show me your zaps, right? And they
Yeah.
would show me, and then
Oh, that's
like
very cool. Yeah.
if you had great zaps, like okay, you're hired, and if you don't, you're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Now today, like outside of Airtable, like what's the stack that like all good employees should be
Mm.
using?
Yeah, well, so first of all, I think that's really interesting because it to me it relates to kind of this founder mode concept, which I think is a misnomer. Like, I don't think founder mode is just about like founders running a company the way they want. I think it's actually about saying like executives in general should be very hands on and in the details and be like experts
Absolutely.
at the actual
Yep.
craft rather than just delegators and managers, right? And I think like that idea of like ask a marketer, especially if even if they're a marketing leader, I assume like you would have
Yeah.
asked that even of like a CMO. Like, if you can't get hands on with a modern stack of tools that make you 10x more effective, then you're clearly not up to speed, right? Like you're not in it enough. And
Yep.
I think no time has that been even more salient than now with like all of the AI tools that you can use. So like, one, we use Airtable a lot for everything, right? So like, actually one of the top use cases in general for Airtable out there in the wild is marketing operations. So everything from like managing a content pipeline, like for this podcast, you could say, hey, here's
Yep.
all the upcoming speakers. Like,
Yep.
now I can have like AI agents in Airtable do research on
By
each
the way,
person, find
we
me some
do
news.
that. We
Okay,
do
that's
that
awesome.
with Airtable for that. Yeah. Yeah.
Good guess then. But like you can also like have it. The cool thing about what you can do with Airtable is that think of like any one-off prompt that you can go and create in ChatGPT, including prompts that leverage web search, right? So like let's say you're researching one speaker that's upcoming on your podcast. So here's a specific prompt that in a very, very nuanced way finds relevant details about them and their history, et cetera, using, basically AI web search, right? And once you have that prompt kind of optimized, now like the current status quo with chat products is like you'd have to go and remember to copy paste that exact prompt and give it the right input contacts. Like if there's more data that you have about your own notes from your own notes about a speaker, and it's quite like laborious to go and like replicate that same AI use case again and again, right? And effectively, what you can do with Airtable now is like bake that prompt into a workflow. Like it's just define a field that performs this agentic action, in this case web search, and do it every single time you add a new podcast guest or upcoming episode, right? And so I think that's the really powerful idea that we have with Airtable is take any AI use case, and obviously like we're all standing on the shoulders of the giants that are the
Yeah.
awesome foundation models that we all now have plenty and cheap and scalable access to, and they just keep getting better, cheaper, faster, right? And like on top of that though, how do you build like a true like application which is effectively just a container holding the right data model, the right workflow, and the right kind of human interface to be in the loop with the agent and AI, kind of applications. So, we do a lot with Airtable, and I would expect any marketer or frankly any role of person that is coming into Airtable today, if not to be an Airtable expert, of course, like we can't only hire people who already know Airtable that well, but like I would expect them to be able to, including in the context of a interview process, to like whip up a pretty good Airtable implementation for
Yep.
a relevant use case. So you could be a lawyer or somebody in our legal team. Can you go and build a contract review workflow in Airtable really quickly? Like that's the kind of systems thinking required, I think, to really leverage AI in the modern era.
No, if you're using like a Zapier
Yeah,
or maybe a newer version of a
yeah,
Zapier, like a Pipe Dream or an N2N or something like
yeah,
that, like they charge on a per action
sure, yep,
basis.
yep,
You get X number of actions and you pay, and then if you go above that, and you get your entire team
mhm,
on it.
yep,
So we have like our 100% of our team using
yeah,
it, and they're all using it and they're all benefiting from it.
yeah,
Airtable's still kind of old school, right? It's per
yeah,
user, right?
sure,
And so it's very limited to, so like if you think of like Airtable versus Google
yeah,
Sheets. I love Airtable. Way prefer Airtable over Google Sheets,
yep,
but Google Sheets is probably has over 100 times the use of our company because Google Sheets is there's no marginal cost.
sure,
I don't
yeah,
have to pay an extra $1,000 per
yeah,
user to go use it.
basically free.
How do you think about pricing? Because like I think you would explode in usage, and I
Yeah,
think the revenue would go up. It might not. It wouldn't
yeah,
maybe go up with relative to the
sure,
explosion, but it'd go up. Like how do you think about pricing and et
yeah.
cetera? As you're, I'm sure you've thought about this a lot.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think pricing is like misleadingly complicated or deceptively complicated, right? Meaning
Yep.
like you want to have a pricing model that is ultimately simple and grokkable by the customer, but there's a lot of, it's like multi-dimensional optimization underneath the hood, right? Meaning like, now, especially like if you want to do consumption-based pricing, okay, but like then what's your actual inference cost? Especially since like usage now sometimes correlates with actual hard costs, and
Yep.
it doesn't always correlate one to one, right? Like you're not necessarily
Yeah,
always
of
like
course.
saying like,
Yeah.
let's
Changes.
say like you price for every Zap in the Zapier model, but some
Yeah.
Zaps take 10 times more costs, including inference costs in between, because they have a reasoning
Yeah.
step with an AI agent. And so are you absorbing that kind of tolerance for like, variable margin on each of these costs? I think it gets really, really tricky.
But,
And
but
the
but
the
that's the
trick
same on a per seat basis too, though, right? I mean, you
is
have
that, yeah,
some seats are just going to cost you way more than others. Some people are logging in all the time,
for
right?
sure. For sure, exactly. And maybe even like arguably more so with the seat-based model. Like then you're, I think like the seat-based model is effectively, on the one extreme of saying, look, like we're going to absorb the variability of cost structure and abstract it away from the user or the customer so that they just see they get a very simple mental model, which is like, okay, I have people and like anyone who wants access to this product, like we're going to pay this amount, right?
Yeah.
And of course, there's some sliding scales of like which plan do you want to be on and like what volume discounts. But like for the most part, it's like how many people do I have that need to use this product and I want to pay for each one, right? And that somewhat like makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, I think, to a lot of customers because like they still think about the value of software as like really an enhancement to human productivity. And I think there's a whole argument around like, well, how quickly are we going to see like agents actually take over jobs and outright replace humans, in which case, like, the value of an agentic solution is not correlated to the number of people using it. In fact, it might be inversely correlated, right? Like if you can displace like 100 roles with one agentic solution, that's
Yeah.
actually worth more. You need to
Or
do
I mean,
outcomes-based
maybe
pricing.
there needs to be a so like I mean, like giving you one of the companies that we have. So
Yeah.
they have about 60
Yeah.
employees,
Okay.
and every month they have between 3 to 6 Airtable seats.
Okay.
Um, so they scale up and then they immediately
Mm,
scale down because like it's really expensive to have
okay.
these.
Yeah.
They should have 60, right? So they should have
Yeah.
60 people
Yeah.
using it. It's an extremely powerful tool. They have 60 people on
Mm,
Zapier,
yeah.
right? Or whatever they're using, Pipe Dream. They have 60 people on
Yeah.
it and they're constantly using it all the time. But like they because it's so expensive, they
Yeah.
like scale it. Like it should be like maybe you have like these like maybe you have like the 5 expensive
That's
seats, and then you have like the super
like
cheap
for
seats for people who just need
right.
to do a little bit here and there or something. Like I
Yeah.
don't know the way to do it, but like I think like most of the company is not using your product, which is
Yeah.
such a great product because it's so because of that price barrier.
No, that's very fair. And I mean, there are like, so we do have a free tier, and you could add, different people to a free workspace in the company, right? So like 50 of the
Yeah.
people could always just be on a free workspace, and they can use like
But if
the
you have
Airtable
a
free
paid
plan.
workspace, if you have like a paid workspace with 3 users, and you want someone else to be interacting with it, then you have to pay for that
That's right.
thing,
Like
right?
everybody
Yeah.
in the workspace that's not, we do have free read only users, but if you want them to be like a full editor, they do have to pay at the same
Yeah,
plan
and
level,
again,
right?
like
So like,
even edit like one tiny thing somewhere,
yeah,
then they have to pay, right? Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah. So that's
one
fair.
time.
And
Yeah, yeah,
and look, I mean, I think it is a question that predates Gen AI and kind of like agentic or consumption based pricing around AI. Actually, I recall like a really interesting conversation I had with Zuck where he's giving me like some advice about thinking about the business, and like he had a radical proposal for me at the time. This was like probably like at least 5 years ago, and it was basically like, what if you just made like Airtable entirely free and like just go for like mass adoption.
yeah,
And instead of doing any kind of seat-based SaaS revenue, like you have this marketplace thing, and we just launched this like effectively like an app platform where like third-party
yeah.
developers as well as us could build like apps that sit on top of Airtable, right?
Oh, right,
And he was
right.
kind of like, what if you just like went all in on like getting scale, and like your eventual revenue model could just be like taking a skim on the apps built on top of
Oh, right,
Airtable.
right. That's
And I remember like
interesting. Yeah,
serious,
yeah. I
yeah, and
mean,
obviously
it's
like I mean,
radical for sure. Yeah,
totally. And like, look, like, I mean, obviously, like, Zuck is a really, really smart guy. So I was like
yeah,
deeply thought about it. And I mean, we actually didn't end up doing that because, AI felt like we could get to some hybrid alternative with a combination of freemium and like other pricing factors. And also like, SaaS is like, are we like more of a SaaS business or are we more of like
Yeah.
a consumer product business, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a valid question. Like we could have gone either route, right? And aim more for like a consumer-esque tool. And we obviously, kind of picked the road of more SaaSy and like, and we were also moving up market into enterprise and able to command like, really large ASPs in enterprise where we have multi-million dollar, paying customers who are building mission critical operations on Airtable, right? Where I mean, the value to them is like higher than maybe they even get from like a Palantir solution in some cases, or like a solution built on a ServiceNow or Salesforce. So I think like, you know, there is some like, kind of strategic direction and vision that is embedded into the pricing model as well. Like, are we aiming more for like the mass scale, mass everybody using it? Or are we aiming to like, go and serve the highest end use cases? Can we do both with some creative combination of pricing? I mean, to your point, like maybe there is an option where like we do have like a more restricted tier of seats so that
Yeah.
you can just add everybody in the company to that workspace. They still can collaborate. But like if they're a very limited or infrequent collaborator, you charge a lot less. So I think those are all valid questions. Things that like
I just
we
want to I
definitely,
just want to get
yeah,
off Google Sheets. Like I want you to help
yeah,
me get off Google
right
Sheets.
on.
And right now I still spend,
Yeah,
even though I love Airtable, so like I love
yeah,
Airtable 20 times more than Google Sheets. I'm in Google
yeah,
Sheets 20 times more time.
yeah, yeah.
And so
Well,
I'm just like, and
that
every
pains
time
me to
I'm there,
hear.
I just curse you. I curse you, Howie.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Oh,
Howie, just
okay.
let me get off Google
Oh,
Sheets.
no. All right. Well, I'm gonna record a loom of you cursing me and just autoplay it until I finally figure out the fix to this. But I think it's a valid push, and like I do think now, especially in the agentic era, like we have even more reason to rethink pricing, right? Like we just
Yeah.
did this big like AI native relaunch, and one of the things we did was we actually bundled. Like before, we had AI as an add-on to Airtable, right? So you have the seat
Yep.
price of Airtable proper, and then you basically had to be on a paid plan of Airtable to then also pay for an add-on of AI, which also then came with some like basically inference credits to
Yeah.
run AI use cases, right? And we basically now said, no, like everything needs to be agentic by default. Like even the free user should come in and get like a vibe coding like app building experience that we're going to eat the cost on, right? I mean, inference is like, cost money and like we're just going to eat
Yeah.
that cost even on our free plan. And so we've already kind of like made some changes to our pricing thinking and gross margin thinking to be able to support the type of like new product paradigm. Like it wouldn't be that radical, or it would be very natural for us to then continue to like think about like, okay, what are new disruptive ways that we can just get more people to get value out of Airtable, right?
World of DaaS isn't just a podcast. World of DaaS membership is a private, invite-only community for founders and executives of important data and AI businesses. It's a place for off-the-record, high-trust conversations focused on the biggest questions data leaders are facing. The community is about peer learning, curated intros, and access to private events. Everyone in the group is building or leading something meaningful in data. If that sounds like you, apply to join at worldofdaas.com. That's worldofdaas.com.
How do you route essentially the AI requests to the best model, and it's both the model that like will both perform the best on that specific topic, but also doesn't like crazy, there's a lot of models which are super low cost. You can even run them locally. So how do you do that yourself? Like, is there some sort of layer that sits on top of it and is a routing system?
For sure. So we have basically two very different but complementary types of AI in Airtable, right? One I call like AI building and AI at runtime. AI building is basically where you come in and this is the vibe coding experience. We have Omni, this agent that you talk to and can build or analyze any app in Airtable, right? So like you can tell it, build me this dashboard in my CRM, go create me this new app that is a podcast tracker, go, add this new object or field to my existing CRM. So it's kind of the app building agent, right? And that one, we basically do have an underlying system where we can like choose different models for different types of requests, right? And some we optimize for latency, so we can very, very quickly like do a simple request. Some we optimize for quality, where like actually it turns out the reasoning models don't always do the best at text processing type tasks, right? So if you give me a bunch of notes and you say, I just want you to like extract out the key people referenced in these freeform nodes, and then go and update those notes into each of those people records in my CRM. Like actually we found that like maybe a non-reasoning model like a GPT 4.1 actually can outperform the reasoning models in a lot of these use cases. So like we're doing a lot of our own selection of what is the best model to use for each of these different types of requests or layers of requests.
Like you just kind of know based on what the request, like how do you even know what the request is and how to route it? Like
so I mean that's an LLM step itself, right? So there's like the LLM step of like and I mean, so one, like evals are super important. I think this is something that like is probably underappreciated, which is like with these building an agentic experience is so unlike traditional deterministic like coding, right? Like when you think about like your algorithms class from CS, it was like very mathematical. There's like a closed form answer to like the optimal way to do like a sort of a list, right? Like whereas with these agents, it's like you do have to like do some trial and error, and by definition, like having a really good eval setup is how you can very efficiently like kind of navigate the somewhat stochastic nature of LLMs, right? Like you don't know predictably like how well they're going to do for any given prompt until you try it. And so you just have to try it, and evals are the way to try them in a consistent, kind of quantitatively measured way. So we have a really good eval stack where we effectively can go and like just try lots of these different combinations. We can A/B test, like, okay, what if we use this more efficient, smaller reasoning model to, kind of decide whether to call on this bigger, slower reasoning model for this type of request. I mean, there's literally like, I have a internal kind of like power user config mode where I can actually go in and like hand override the different models we use at different layers or for different types of requests. And like there's like literally
you
a dozen.
You have to continually doing that, because like all of a sudden you can be like, wow, we could save like $100,000 a day if we just do this thing. And it's like, it's as good. Sometimes it may even be better for the user.
That's the thing is like, I would never, I mean, I think we're still at the point where like, we're not really cost optimizing. Like I would rather eat as much cost as we can in this moment to deliver the best quality experience, right? And I have high confidence that like cost will come down naturally for any given quality level. Like, I mean, look at O3, like Sam Altman literally tweeted like a couple months ago, like O3, we just 5x or decreased the price right now by 5x. Like that's insane. Like literally as of this tweet, we dropped the pricing by 5x, right? And so there's a massive race to the bottom. And there's like software optimizations to inference. There's obviously the hardware costs going down for like the same amount of like, effectively flops, of compute.
By the way, he's taking the Zuck pricing strategy, kind of like he's trying to get mass adoption, not trying to optimize.
Totally. And I think that's probably the right thing to do in their race, which is like, I think there is a huge advantage to the provider that has kind of the like cognitive referent or default set of models, right? Like that not only people use through the consumer product, ChatGPT, but then even like programmatically through API. Like if everybody just like learns the ins and outs and the nuances of like the OpenAI models and the texture of O3 over, let's say, 4.0 Sonnet from Anthropic, then like there's huge long-term strategic advantages to that, right?
Especially
it's like becoming like
memory, especially when they have memory, right?
Exactly. Well, the memory part for sure on like a per customer level makes it much more sticky. But I also just think it becomes a standard, right? It's kind of like Excel, going back to our earlier discussion, like Excel becoming a standard. And it means that like I remember like in the Windows 95 era, like I think my family was poor, and like we actually didn't want to spend like the $300 on Microsoft Office at the time. And so we bought some like knockoff version of it. I forget what it was called. It was WordPerfect, actually, I think, and the correlated and the associated products, and it was just like not as good. And I remember like
Yeah.
going into school, and like in our school, we had like a computer lab, and like we learned Excel and Word and all the like, the
Yep.
Microsoft
Yep.
products there. And I learned all the shortcuts and the advanced features. And I went home. It's like, well, the thing that we have doesn't even have all that, right? So
Right.
having the standard where like people just like learn,
Right.
developers
Oh,
and
this is
consumers
good.
alike
I mean,
learn.
you're like
Yeah.
sticking by. This is why I want Airtable. Everyone
Okay. All
using
right. All right.
Airtable as
You
well.
convinced me. Okay. We're gonna mark my words. We will do some radical improvements to our pricing model to expand the funnel by far of people using the product.
I
I'm
want
very aligned
every
on that.
kid in school using it. Yeah.
Well, I do think, I mean, like on this note of drawing the parallel back to like ChatGPT, I do think in the AI era, like there's clearly some products that have been successful doing an enterprise sold motion. Like, some that come to mind are like, the Harveys of the world, like,
Yeah.
very much enterprise sold. Even Palantir's like custom
Yeah.
AI
Of course.
deployment
Yeah.
model, right? AIP.
Yeah.
But I think by and large, the vast majority of real AI value creation and adoption and even revenue has come through consumer led or like end user led adoption, right?
Yeah.
Like PLG.
Bottoms up
Like, I mean, look,
referrals, talking
ChatGPT
about it.
alone,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, ChatGPT alone, like I think OpenAI is now like a 10 billion revenue run rate business, right? And
Same.
I assume the vast majority of that is ChatGPT. And so, like, I mean, ChatGPT alone probably is like the lion's share of total AI revenue out there today,
Yeah.
right? True Gen AI revenue at least. And so, like, not to mention, like, you have the Cursors of the world, you have the
Yep.
Manuses, et cetera, that are all like PLG led. And so I think there is a strong favoring of like, for AI experiences, it's better experience, it's better shown, and like, better yet, like just self-served rather than sold or
Yeah.
told, right? And
Yeah.
so
And
I
no
think even
long-term
more
contract, easy to just, try it out.
exactly,
So some of these do have much higher churn than others.
yeah.
But
But
it's
but
it's
like
good.
I'll take a
Yeah.
10x bigger funnel with 2x higher drop off, right? Like that's
Yeah,
still
yeah,
you still net out way
and
better.
no salespeople to pay, and all this other
Exactly,
stuff, right? Yeah.
exactly.
So your
And I
CACs
think
are
that
much lower. Like if your CACs go down by
yeah,
20x, like who cares if your churn goes up by
totally.
3x? Like,
Yeah, yeah. Or I mean, your CAC could be zero if you're ChatGPT, right?
right,
It's just
right,
like
right. That's
massively
right.
viral, and
Yeah,
like people just talk
yeah.
about it. And I mean, I've seen the
Well,
retention
actually,
curves
I don't
for
know. I bet you their CACs are like insanely high because most of their CACs are like Sam tweeting, and Sam's
right.
time is probably
Okay,
worth, I don't know, $1 million
that's
an
fair.
hour or
That's
something,
fair.
right?
That's
So
fair.
it's
Okay,
probably
well,
like their CACs are probably like insanely high if you put his
okay,
hourly rate on it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Although you could say he probably derives some amount of like personal entertainment value from the
Good
tweeting.
point.
So is that
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
just like a
Okay, yeah.
moonlight
So he
job or
would
his
maybe he
actual
would
like
have
paid
done it
job?
anyway,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
good point. Yeah, yeah.
And at one point, at least, he had like he said he had like zero equity in OpenAI. So actually, maybe his time is free at that time. So
Right, right, right,
uh,
right. It's a good point. Yeah.
yeah,
From OpenAI's perspective. Yeah, exactly.
exactly. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think like punchline is, I do think like within the era of AI, the importance of like getting just more people into the top of funnel to just like actually use and try your product is more critical than ever. So, to your credit, like on the pricing model stuff, it's like, we definitely want, like, I think Palantir, short term bullish on, long term uncertain on. I would never bet against them, but like
Yeah.
short term, they've clearly found this like repeatable motion of like selling like a turnkey way to just like deploy AI into the enterprise, right? Longer term, I think like there's a question of like, well, does all of the AI deployment just become like self-serve and like so easy to spin up that like companies don't need like the current Palantir like very heavyweight sold model? They send an FDE, you're paying like millions of dollars, for a custom build.
I do think
Like,
when
do they
you're
just
dealing
go and
with with security type of
yeah,
information that is national security related or something like that, you're probably still going to need to be sold to
oh,
for
for sure,
quite a
for
long
sure.
time. Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely for that. But Palantir today is actually now already trying to sell down market as well, right? Like, I mean, even like smaller companies that are not dealing with like high security issues, doing like, much what would be considered like much more banal deployments. Like, here's like how we're deriving insights from customer feedback.
Oh, really?
Here's how. Oh
Okay,
yeah,
I don't.
yeah,
If I ever saw a random company doing that, I was like, okay, that's not a good deal. Like Palantir is like,
yeah.
okay, you should be paying Palantir at least $5 million for your implementation.
Right,
If
right,
they're
right.
trying to
Well,
sell
I
like
think
$100
what's
grand thing, that's probably not the
yeah.
right thing for them.
I think there's this like near term windfall that Palantir is getting around like CEO led, kind of purchases of Palantir as an easy button to show that they have some AI
Yeah. Okay.
implementations, right? It's
Yeah.
it's like the CYA, cover your butt to the board and to the public market, maybe. Even if you're a smaller company and not in security, not in like high data sensitivity, to just be able to say like, I have an AI deployment, right? And
Always.
I think that like as the self-serve ways to do that and do that in a meaningful way, not just like a gimmicky or like, like toy way. Like early on, people were all using ChatGPT for like superfluous, like fun, gimmicky things, right? Like people were like trying like, the like talk like a pirate thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas now I think they're actually figuring out how to use it for more meaningful use cases, and better yet, like using the underlying models in a tool like an Airtable to then like power a more recurring workflow that is actually high value, right? And maybe it like you shouldn't be paying like hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to Palantir to like do a bespoke build for.
Now, there's a ton of Acqui-Hires that are going on
Yeah.
in our
Yeah.
industry. Back in the day, an Acqui-Hire was like
Yeah.
a pejorative word. And today,
Yeah.
Acqui-Hire could mean like you're getting like $1 billion or more than $1
I
billion.
know. Yeah.
Like, what's your thought about where we are in this like weird moment, and how
Yeah.
does it continue? Does it stop? Like, is it just like this odd, like
Yeah.
weird, like moment in history?
Yeah. I mean, it's totally changed, right? I mean, like I was acqui-hired in my first company by Salesforce, right?
Yeah.
And at the time, like that meant like maybe a low seven-figure payout and like some retention plan or whatever. But like, I mean, when you look at like the recent acqui-hires of, I mean, very recently, Windsurf or Scale, et cetera. I mean, these are like, monetary sums that look like full business buyouts. I mean, like the Scale
Yeah.
$14 billion price tag. I mean, that's like bigger than a lot of public companies, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah, it's an
mature cash flow
Acqui-Hire
generating.
where the founder gets into the Forbes 400, right?
Totally.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And the crazy thing is, I mean, it is truly an acqui-hire because partly maybe to avoid antitrust scrutiny, it's like they're not actually buying the business. They're not buying the company, the entity, the business, the IP. They're intentionally leaving that behind. And in fact,
yeah,
like Scale, the business is still an independently operating company, right? Like, and so like I think to me it's like a little bit of like the key person theory, right? Of kind of human civilization, like how much of technological progress or just like progress is driven by like a couple very very important key actors who have the unique insight or wherewithal to just really move things forward. And it seems like, and I would generally agree with this, like that right now in this moment, given the ingredients of like all of the potential things you can do with AI, and especially if you have massive resources like a Meta, that you can gain leverage with. Like if you win at AI, that is worth trillions of dollars to you. But if you lose at it, like you've basically become irrelevant. Like I think we are at this moment where it's not just about hiring up an army of like 100,000 people to work on a problem. It's about finding like the critical people who like really have the combination of like insight, ingenuity, but also just extreme like motivation and intensity to make big things happen, right? So like I think it's actually somewhat rational for these acqui-hires to happen. Not just because like they have to be done this way to avoid the antitrust issues, but because like Meta is basically saying, look, like I value Alex and the team that's coming along so much to really accelerate my efforts on AI that like it's literally worth. I mean, 14 billion is not even that big of a percent of their total market cap, right? Or even cash
but
on hand.
but Meta values Alex, who is going to be an executive at Meta, important
Yeah,
person, but not
yeah,
the CEO, not
correct.
anywhere
Yeah,
close.
yeah.
They value him way more than Apple values Tim Cook in terms of compensation.
Uh, yes. I mean, monetary, like financially.
A
Yeah,
order of magnitude more they value Alex than Apple values Tim Cook, right?
yeah, yeah.
And so like these CEOs of public companies are less valuable
Valuable.
than often like the 100th AI engineer at Meta.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very valid point, and like I actually think it's a good system if you can value talent for like rationally based on how much leverage they provide the business rather than having some artificial like internal reasons or hierarchical reasons for why you can or cannot pay talent, a certain amount, right? Like it kind of, I mean, it becomes like a whole like, soliloquy about capitalism, but like, at least in this like specific regard, like Ben and Jerry's tried the experiment at one point of like the best paid employee, which happened to be the CEO for them, like could not be paid more than 10x more than the lowest paid employee, right? Who might
Yeah.
be somebody like literally manufacturing, the ice cream in the factory. And of course, like, I believe in like fair wage, like, people should be paid well and like so on. But like, I think like you also need to just hire the best person that creates the most leverage for the most important jobs, right? And or
Yeah.
the roles. And so I think like it's, maybe an interesting comparable here would be like in professional sports, like you have some players that probably make far more than the like manager of the
Yep.
teams, right? Like, and that's rational because like if the player is that good, like the team actually wins and then the whole franchise becomes more valuable.
Yep. And the analogy may hold all the way through because it's very possible that this employee is only important in a very brief moment of time for 3 years. They're going to
Yeah.
add value, and
Yeah.
then they're not going to add as much value. Just like a great professional athlete may only be good in a very short moment of time, but like 20 years from now, they're almost certainly not going to be playing on the team anymore.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think like, I mean, this is one of those things that like I feel like I've really it's like, a known like best practice or piece of kind of managerial theory, which is like, it's a team, not a family. You gotta like think of like,
Yep.
each team member as like being a part of the team in this moment, and you can appreciate them for that and always think highly of them in retrospect. But not every team member needs to be part of the team forever, right? And in fact, like that includes the CEO and sometimes the founder as
Sure.
well. But like it is always about like solving for what we need at this moment in time. Because if we don't put one foot in front of the next and like, really execute well in this moment, like we're not going to have the chance to play a good hand in the next moment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, you've been doing Airtable for 12, 13 years now. Like, how do you think about okay, how do you think about the next 12 to 13
Yeah.
years? How do you think about your future and what you're doing? And
Yeah.
how does one, obviously build a great company, but like, how do you think
Yeah.
about this like going forward?
Yeah. So, I remember reading this like HBS article a while back called like your strategy needs a strategy, right? And it said like, look, like, the right way to think about strategy is actually market dynamic dependent, meaning if you're in a market or a moment with a very low rate of change, like it's a stable environment, and you could maybe call like a certain era of mature SaaS, as being, kind of an example of this, like it's kind of deterministic. You can kind of just execute in a
Yeah.
pretty known way. And it's really about like predictability and like how do you build like a really durable business. And like, a lot of the PE buyouts are examples of this where it's like, okay, we know what we're getting. We're not going to expect like some crazy rabbit out of the hat, like
Yep.
innovation from this business that we bought, but we're just going to chug in, day out. We could probably like, continue to scale this. Whereas if you're in an environment where like there's an extremely high rate of change or like a lot of uncertainty, which I would say we're definitely in across all of software now because of AI, like I think you have to just be completely adaptable. Like agility is much more important than like having like a clear known long-term pathing of we're going to do this and this and this and this, and this is exactly what's going to happen, right? And so like to me, it's about like playing in the right space, first of all. Like, are we picking like the right vision and the right category to disrupt? And maybe the category doesn't fully like look baked yet, right? But
Yep.
no code to me is absolutely like a category that holds even more relevance and is even more exciting in the agentic era, right? Like like literally, if you interpret the words no code, like what can people who don't know how to code do with software or app building? That only gets more magical, and like the market only radically expands in the AI era. So are we picking in the right space? Are we playing the right space? I feel very confident the answer is yes. And then, it's less about like what's our like let's predict 10 chess moves out what we're going to play, and instead say like, do we have a good hand right now? Like, do we have the right
But like,
pieces?
okay, but like just
And
asking like more of a personal question, like
yeah,
at some point,
yeah,
like Zuck's still there, but he hasn't been
yeah,
there as long as
yeah,
like Jensen Huang, who's been there
yeah,
forever, right? He's been kind of doing this crazy, but
yeah,
then Larry Page is no longer CEO, Jeff Bezos is
yeah,
no longer CEO,
yeah,
Bill Gates like left a long, long, long time ago.
Yeah.
And like at some point, like people want to go do other things. Like, how do you think
Sure.
about it personally? Like I'm sure they still have those
Yeah.
challenges and those other types of things. And when Gates left, like right when the internet was happening, like it could have been
Yeah.
maybe he should have stayed, but he decided he wanted to do other things.
Yeah, I mean that's totally fair. So to me, it's like there's two questions. One is like, do I have the energy and the motivation to keep doing this, right?
Yes.
Period, right? Or doing anything, right? Versus like, some people go into like semi-retirement, maybe they do like an easier job or whatever. There's nothing
Yeah,
wrong with
yeah. They're
that.
on
But
the
like,
their winery, putting
yeah, it's
around
like the
and
hobby
stuff. Their yacht.
projects or
Yeah.
like, and no offense to anyone like, who goes into like permanent like board role, kind of state. But like,
Mhm.
there is a path where like you
Or
no longer want to
they
be.
become a venture capitalist. That's the typical
VC
retirement,
can be
right?
hard as
Yeah,
well in very different
yeah,
ways. But it's like, do you just not have the energy? And it's fine to admit it, like to not be an operator anymore, full-time operator in intense mode. And then two, like, even if you are motivated to be an operator, like, is this no longer a space that interests you? And I can
yeah,
definitively say, like, on the number one front, like, I am more fired up than ever before. Like, I mean,
yeah,
look, I mean, maybe partly it's a function of age. Like, I'm thankful that like I got my start very early. Like, I mean,
yeah,
you
yeah.
you decided the math early, but
Yep,
like I'm only 36 right now, right? And so I feel like I'm just beginning.
totally.
And I've just kind of learned the basics of like how to be a somewhat effective operator and founder
Yeah.
CEO and whatever. So like I'm nowhere near ready to retire. And then on the two front, like, is this the right space? I think I will say, like, I think if we were reaching this kind of mature, like, this starts to look more like a PE type of business where like you just kind of do the same thing year in, year
Yeah.
out. And like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
margin of difference between me
And
and
you
some
then you
other.
go hire a Tim
Yeah, I
Cook
mean,
or
it's like, okay,
something.
like
Yeah.
I would no longer be that fired up about it, nor would I probably be like Six Sigma better than, the median person at it. And
Yep.
so like there's probably somebody else who could do that equally well or better. Whereas now it's like this is really a refounding moment. And like I get to do something that I'm really excited about, which is like start with technology first innovation, which I think is really important. Like, in the mature market environment, like it's no longer about like finding disruptive tech innovation. It's more about saying like, okay, like SaaS is kind of mature. Anybody can build a database, like, or a hard coded database with like application logic on top and create a CRM for X, right? Like, and then there were so many different permutations of X. Like, here's the CRM for this kind of doctor or this kind of dentist or this kind of, plumber, et cetera. You can build a good business that way. But what fires me up is like, I think I'm a technologist at heart. And like, I've always found that like, really understanding the cutting edge of what's possible technologically. And maybe in the beginning of Airtable, that was like building our own robust single page app framework before there was good prior art. Like React didn't exist, Backbone even didn't exist. Like we
Yeah.
have to roll our own like rich front end experience. We also have to build our own like back end and create a real time database engine and like a real time collaboration layer, et cetera. Like all these things were actually hard technical problems that we also combined with like a creative kind of sense of taste of like, how do we not just build tech for tech's sake, but make this an awesome and delightful product experience? And we're going to learn a lot while doing it, right? And so to me, it's like the new Airtable has every bit of that and more that we had in the beginning. And so it's like I get to go and play with like all the cutting edge tech. How do you build agents? How do you build like, new things with models? How do you go and use existing products off the shelf? And then how do we like creatively think about like reproductizing that into a new form?
Now, a couple of personal questions. What is
Yeah.
a conspiracy theory that you believe?
Oh. I don't really have that many like conspiracy theories. Like I guess I would put it this way, like I generally like I think I actually hold like the world as I hold a very stochastic view of the world, which is like I don't think like I know how everything works perfectly. I don't think anyone knows how everything works perfectly. And I think there's almost this just like this certain level of randomness and like just known unknowns. And so therefore it's like, I think to me, it's like never about like, was the lunar landing definitely real or was it fake? Well, like, probably given my priors, like it's like P99.9%
Yep.
likely real, but
Yep.
0.1% maybe fake. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I just think,
I'm in the same place as you
yeah,
are on that one.
I just
Yeah,
watched
yeah,
that comedy movie, Fly Me to the Moon with Channing Tatum and ScarJo, and it's literally about this. And obviously, the whole thing was like meant to be comedy, but like I found it like to be a really like I just love to like think about the what ifs or the
yeah.
possibilities, not because like I then come away like thinking, oh, it's 100% faked, but just like it tickles my fancy to like imagine like alternate realities and then hold both those things. But I mean, I don't know if there's a a big conspiracy theory I hold.
All right. Well, last question we ask all of our guests: what
Yeah.
conventional wisdom or advice do you think is generally bad advice?
Well, I definitely think the stuff that Brian Chesky talked about in that now famous Founder Mode talk resonated very deeply with me, which is like there was an era of Silicon Valley and this was true for Airtable as well, where like the conventional wisdom told to us was like, hey, you got to go and like apply all these traditional ways of running this company, hire traditional leaders who have a
Yep.
traditional skill set, and so on. And there's probably some truth to that. Like, I mean, look, like you can't just like run fast and loose in every way like a two-person company, like, even as you reach maturity and need to be like public ready and so on. But like, I also think if you lean too much in that direction, which a lot of companies, including us, did, then you lose the ability to have that agility, which is especially important
Yes.
now. And also, you lose the unique alpha that I think like these highly innovative companies that by definition, like if you innovated it well enough to get amazing product market fit to begin with, like that's your alpha. That was your alpha at that time. And if you can keep doing that instead of just like maturing and milking the original innovation for a really long time, like if you can go create new innovation and like reinvent yourself, like I think that's
Yep.
both profoundly valuable, but also requires a radically different approach to running your business, running your company, right? And, Brian would call it founder mode. I call it just like, kind of high agency, like being in the details, being radical, being high agility, and disrupting yourself every, at least couple years.
What's the biggest, or what's the biggest kind of conventional one that you just like you took out or you stopped doing or whatever, and it just had the most impact in the company? Was it like, okay, we don't need all these weird
Yeah.
HR rules or something, or
I mean, some HR roles you still definitely need. But I think it's like one, like how I hire. So, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but like I think, like when I think about exec hiring, like execs are not just about like managing people and process. They really need to be experts of their own craft, right? So if you're a marketer, if you're a product person, you actually have to be good at product. You have to be good at marketing. And especially now, like, you have to be like highly fluent in like getting hands-on with like real AI use cases and building things. And
you
like,
can't just be a manager.
yeah, exactly. Because like, first of all, it takes fluency with tech and products to be able to talk about those products and to be able to make decisions about them. And now more so than ever, it's all so nuanced and so fast moving. You have to be in it. So detail oriented, and in it, experts of their craft as executives, I think is one big shift for me. Two is like, I think that like I just, kind of accepted as common Silicon Valley wisdom that like you have to have all of this process and structure in general in how you do things, right? So like, you have to have like these like first of all, like we used to use a lot of like the RACI model, which is like how you define like different multi-party responsibility and accountability, right? I mean, literally that's what it is. And like, I think anytime you have like a really complicated matrix of, well, these 5 people need to be informed about this thing and this person needs to be accountable to this, but that person's responsible for this, like you're probably overcomplicating it.
Correct.
And what you probably should be doing is like picking one person to be the DRI with a small lean team to just go spike on this rapidly move and do as much in a zero dependency way as possible, and just
This
like
is the
try stuff,
like
ship it
the
faster.
HR innovation that Amazon had was the
Yeah.
2 pizza rule, right? It's just like we're going to do 2 pizza,
Exactly.
and then somehow you just API it to everybody else, whether you're
Totally.
the HR team or whether you're a product team.
Totally. And I think like it sounds simple, but like the implications are quite profound because it means that sometimes structurally it actually changes the nature of work that you take on, right? Like, I mean, there's certain types of projects that you can't do this way. And in fact, if you prioritize this style of execution, like it actually shifts how you execute and therefore even like how your product or business model starts to look over time, right? Like you become an accumulation of like lots of rapid learnings and quick hits, rather than trying to make these like huge, slow single swings that either have to be right or you fail.
This has been amazing. Thank you, Howie Liu, for joining us at World of DaaS. I follow you at Howie TL What does the T stand
Yep.
for, by the way?
Just my middle name, Thomas.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I follow you at Howie TL on X. I definitely encourage our listeners to engage you there. This has been really awesome.
Awesome. This was really, really fun. Thanks for having me, Auren. And yeah, happy to chat.
Thanks for listening. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to World of DaaS wherever you consume your podcasts, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and more. And please help us get discovered by leaving a review. And check out worldofdaas.com. That's worldofdaas.com. And of course, connect with me on Twitter at Auren. That's AUREN. Would absolutely love to hear from you.